Jared Hughes had never experienced anything like it. His eyes snapped open, a sudden rush of awareness flooding his mind as his consciousness slowly registered something strange. Something heavy pressed against his chest. The warm morning sunlight filtered through the bedroom window, casting long, soft beams of light across the room. It should have been a peaceful morning, but what Jared saw made his heart skip several beats. There, sprawled across his naked body, was his new housekeeper, Lyra. Her skin gleamed a soft lavender under the sunlight, her delicate, almost ethereal features illuminated by the golden rays. Her large sapphire eyes were shut peacefully, completely unaware that Jared was awake. For a long, breathless moment, he simply stared at the surreal scene in front of him. His mind raced to understand what was happening. How did this happen? What the hell? Jared whispered, his voice barely a murmur as he tried to make sense of it all. His breath caught in his throat, his body stiffening with shock. Lyra's bald head, which had a faint crest on it, rested just below his chin. Her soft, warm breath tickled his chest as she lay across him, her body a perfect contrast to his in both size and appearance. It was as if a strange, dreamlike vision had come to life in his bed. A slight movement on Jared's part was enough to disturb the peacefulness of the moment. Lyra's eyes fluttered open, and for a brief moment, she and Jared locked gazes. The shock in both of their eyes was mutual, each of them frozen in confusion for a beat too long. "Oh," Lyra exclaimed, her voice filled with sudden embarrassment as she gracefully rolled off Jared. Despite the awkwardness of the situation, her movements were fluid, almost graceful. It was as if she had practiced such movements for years. Once, she sat on the edge of the bed. She lowered her head in apology. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Hughes. This is entirely my fault," she said, her voice melodic, but tinged with distress. "I should have explained my species' customs more thoroughly before accepting this position." Jared sat up quickly, the blanket he had pulled over himself as a reflex slipping slightly. He ran a hand through his messy brown hair, trying to regain some composure while his heart still raced in his chest. "Lyra," he began, his voice strained with confusion, "I'm going to need a hell of an explanation here." Lyra, now sitting, on the edge of the bed with her back slightly hunched, looked down at her hands for a moment before speaking again. "You see, my people, the Tivari, have a custom called communal sleeping. It's a way of conserving energy," she explained, her tone thoughtful but apologetic. "It's deeply ingrained in our biology and culture. After finishing my evening duties, I saw you sleeping and, well, my instincts took over." Her voice trailed off as if she hadn't meant for it to sound as strange as it did. Jared blinked, trying to wrap his mind around her words. Communal sleeping? What kind of custom was that? He couldn't help but glance at her once more, noting how her lavender skin shimmered under the light. Despite the oddity of the situation, he couldn't help but find her appearance intriguing. Wait a second," Jared said, trying to stay calm. "You're telling me that your species, your people, sleep like this, on top of one another?" Lyra's crest, a smooth, delicate line that ran along her skull, flushed a deeper shade of purple as she nodded. "Yes, it's completely normal for us," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "We share body heat to conserve energy, especially when resting after our long hours of work. We do not view it in a romantic or intimate sense. It's simply a biological need for us." She paused, a small frown crossing her face. "But I should have realized that humans might interpret it differently." "I should have asked." Jared's face reddened as he processed her explanation. He had hired Lyra through an intergalactic domestic services agency, impressed by her references and her species' reputation for efficiency. But he hadn't expected a cultural collision of this magnitude. "Okay, I get it," he said, exhaling slowly. "But you still can't just, lie on top of me like that, especially without saying anything first. We need some boundaries here. Boundaries are important." "Of course," Lyra said, nodding quickly. "I completely understand. I'll do my best to respect your human boundaries." She stood up and grabbed her uniform from where it was neatly folded on a nearby chair. As she dressed, she looked over at Jared, her expression softening slightly. "I do apologize for any discomfort I may have caused you. I had no intention of making you feel uncomfortable." Jared, still a little shaken, sighed as he tried to regain some semblance of normalcy. "Yeah, well, maybe next time a little warning would help." "Next time?" Lyra asked, her eyes widening slightly. "There will be no next time, I promise." Jared laughed nervously, not entirely sure how to navigate this weird situation. "Right, okay," he said, rubbing his face. I think we need to establish some ground rules. Rule number 1, no more surprise cuddles in my bed, okay?" Lyra's crest rippled with a small smile, her blue eyes sparkling with amusement. "Noted," she said, her tone playful. "Though I must point out, Mr. Hughes, that you are still quite naked yourself." Jared's face turned crimson again as he pulled the blanket tightly around his waist. "Right. Well, how about you go ahead and start on those pancakes, and I'll get dressed," he said quickly, trying to deflect the attention away from his current state. "Pancakes?" Lyra asked, tilting her head in curiosity. "Yes, I believe I've been practicing human cooking techniques. I've read that pancakes are quite popular." "Yeah, they're great," Jared replied, still recovering from the earlier shock. "But seriously, I think we need to talk more about boundaries first. Clothing, mandatory, outside of private quarters." "Understood," Lyra said with a small chuckle, nodding as she left the room. "But pancakes first, yes?" Jared lay back on the bed, running a hand over his face, trying to make sense of the bizarre situation he'd found himself in. It seemed that his new life with Lyra, the alien housekeeper, was going to be much more complicated than he had anticipated. "What have I gotten myself into?" he muttered to himself, the sound of Lyra's voice calling out to him from the kitchen filling the silence. And with that, the day had only just begun. As the morning wore on, Jared couldn't shake the awkwardness of the situation. The conversation with Lyra had left him stunned, his mind racing with questions he couldn't fully comprehend. After a hasty breakfast, he excused himself to the living room, hoping to find some semblance of normalcy. The idea of having an alien housekeeper from a completely different culture, who seemed unaware of basic human boundaries, was still a lot for him to process. But as the day went on, it became clear that this was no ordinary living arrangement. Lyra, after all, wasn't just any housekeeper. She was a member of the Tavari, an alien species with customs that were as foreign to Jared as the stars themselves. Jared had read all the information in the Intergalactic Agency's pamphlets, at least the parts that were relevant, but nothing could have prepared him for the reality of having someone like Lyra living in his home. Later that morning, as Jared attempted to get back to his usual routine, he found Lyra in the kitchen again, this time working diligently on what she referred to as human pancakes. As he walked into the room, the sight before him nearly made him stumble. There she was, standing at the stove, her movements fluid as she flipped a pancake with surprising skill. She was dressed in her uniform, which clung to her form in a way that seemed almost out of place considering their earlier awkward exchange. Jared took a moment to collect himself, trying to ignore the sense of unease that still lingered in his chest. "Those smell good," he said cautiously, his voice betraying his attempt to sound casual. Lyra turned to him with a bright smile, her sapphire blue eyes sparkling. "I've been studying human cooking techniques," she said cheerfully, as though making pancakes was the most normal thing in the universe. "I found this recipe in your data files. It said pancakes were a popular breakfast food." Jared's eyes widened in surprise. "Wait, you went through my data files?" he asked, raising an eyebrow. "That's a little invasive, don't you think?" Lyra didn't seem to pick up on the tone of his voice. "Oh no, it was all part of my research," she said, her voice upbeat and entirely unbothered. "I had to learn about your dietary preferences before arriving. Your nutritional data indicated a strong preference for carbohydrates, especially breakfast foods." She set a plate of perfectly golden pancakes in front of him, smiling as she added, "I also took the liberty of adding some berries which I found in your storage unit." Jared stared at the pancakes in front of him, his brain trying to make sense of the situation. "Storage unit?" he repeated, half laughing. You mean the fridge? Yes. Your refrigeration system, Lyra responded, her tone unfazed. It was very easy to access. You humans don't hide your food very well. I was able to catalog everything based on your preferences. Jared blinked. You cataloged my food preferences? Lyra nodded enthusiastically, pleased with her own thoroughness. Yes. You seem to prefer fruit, so I took some berries. I also noticed you keep an abundance of caffeine-based liquids. I assumed you liked coffee, so I've prepared a fresh brew. For you. Jared struggled to suppress a chuckle. Okay, I can appreciate the effort, I guess, but I really think we need to have a chat about personal space. Lyra's face remained serious. Personal space? She asked, clearly confused. Yes, personal space, Jared repeated, taking a deep breath. It's a concept humans really value. Like, if you're going to stay here, we need to respect some boundaries, especially when it comes to privacy. You can't just go through my stuff without asking first. I apologize again for the confusion, Lyra said, her crest flushing with a faint pink hue. I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable. I'll be more careful in the future. But, she added, leaning slightly closer, I must admit I am very curious about human relationships. You see, in Tivari culture, relationships are open and direct. There are no formalities or misunderstandings. So when I see someone I find interesting, well, it's natural for me to want to learn about them, even their food choices. Jared shifted uncomfortably in his seat, realizing just how forward Lyra was. I appreciate the curiosity, he said, trying to keep the conversation light. But there are certain things humans don't talk about so openly. Lyra cocked her head, her blue eyes narrowing slightly in thought. Like relationships? She asked, her voice lowering as she continued. I have learned that humans are quite complicated in that area. You seem to have many rituals and rules for interactions, many of which are based on emotional attachment. In Tivari culture, we do not waste time with such formalities. If we feel attraction, we express it. No hesitation, no second guessing. Jared nearly choked on his pancake. Wait, you think... He stopped, realizing the conversation was spiraling out of control. No, that's not what I meant. I'm just saying, we need to respect each other's space here. You can't just expect me to fall in line with your culture without understanding mine first. Lyra seemed genuinely puzzled. But I thought we were already doing that, she said innocently. We're sharing space, sharing food, and I've already shared my most intimate customs with you. It's how Tivari people bond. Jared let out a deep sigh, rubbing his temples. Lyra, I'm just trying to understand everything, okay? I mean, you're from a different planet. Your culture, your biology, they're also different from mine. It's like learning a new language, one word at a time. I understand now, Lyra said thoughtfully, her tone softening. But you must understand, Tivari culture is rooted in openness and trust. When we feel something for someone, we show them. We don't hide our emotions. Jared paused. You don't hide your emotions? No, she replied firmly. And we certainly don't hide attraction. We express it without shame. If there is a bond, we nurture it openly. No need for formality. Jared's mind reeled. He had no idea how to handle a situation like this. His attraction to Lyra was undeniable. She was beautiful, intriguing, and completely foreign to him. But how could he navigate a relationship with someone who had such a different understanding of emotional boundaries? And more importantly, how would he keep things professional while dealing with these cultural differences? Lyra, Jared said slowly, his voice calmer now. I think we need to set some rules. We need to talk more about these cultural differences. Learn each other's boundaries. What might be normal for you isn't always normal for me. I agree, Lyra said, nodding with a soft smile. Perhaps we can talk over dinner tonight. I've been learning about human rituals and would love to discuss more. But for now, let me finish making your pancakes. Jared smiled, relieved that they were on the same page for once. He watched as Lyra finished preparing the pancakes with a newfound sense of understanding, As strange as this situation was, it seemed like he had just stepped into a world that was going to challenge everything he knew about relationships, personal space, and, most of all, his growing attraction to the mysterious alien who had unexpectedly taken over his life. Jared couldn't help but feel like he was caught in some strange dream. What started as a simple hire for a housekeeper had quickly spiraled into a daily whirlwind of cultural confusion and unexpected emotions. Yet, despite the constant awkwardness, there was a strange allure to Lyra. Maybe it was her unwavering curiosity about human life, or perhaps it was her unguarded, open way of interacting with him that left him simultaneously uncomfortable and strangely captivated. The next few days felt like a blur of moments that blurred the lines between professional and personal. As Lyra continued to adjust to Earth customs, she seemed genuinely invested in learning more about humans, about Jared specifically. She would frequently ask him questions about emotions, relationships, and even human behavior, often making observations about his physiological responses. One afternoon, as Jared sat down at the dining table, his mind still buzzing from the morning's events, Lyra entered with a small tray of tea. Her lavender skin shimmered under the soft lighting, her calm demeanor somehow making the tension in the air seem lighter. She placed the tea in front of him, her sharp eyes watching him closely. "I've been studying human reactions to various stimuli," she began, setting down the tray with graceful ease. "I've noticed that you seem to become slightly tense when I enter the room. Is it because you're uncomfortable in my presence?" Jared blinked in surprise, unsure how to respond. It wasn't like he was intentionally nervous, but the presence of someone so open, so direct in their manner of communication, had a way of making him question his own behavior. "I wouldn't say uncomfortable exactly," he muttered. "It's just, you're different. You don't do things like humans do, and it's hard to keep up." Lyra's crest rippled slightly, her face breaking into a soft smile. "I understand. I am an anomaly to you, aren't I? But that is part of why I am so fascinated by you. You are full of contradictions. You say you are uncomfortable, but you show signs of attraction when you look at me." Jared felt his face flush. "Attraction?" he repeated, his voice rising in pitch. That's not what I meant. I mean, Jared," she interrupted gently, "I'm not trying to embarrass you. In fact, I'm studying how your emotions manifest physically. I've learned that humans, unlike us, try to hide their feelings. Your heart rate increases. When I approach, your pupils dilate when you speak to me, and your voice becomes softer. It is clear that there is something more than discomfort." Jared sat back in his chair, trying to steady his breathing. "Lyra, look, I think you're jumping to conclusions. You're reading too much into my reactions. I'm just not used to, well, this." He gestured around the room, his hand sweeping over the pristine furniture, the clean floors, and the air of stillness that seemed to settle between them. Lyra tilted her head slightly, her gaze softening. "I understand. I've never had a bond with a human before. It's difficult for me to predict your responses. My species communicates through empathy, and we feel emotions strongly. But with you, I sense something unexpected. I feel your hesitations, but also your growing curiosity." Jared swallowed hard, unsure of how to proceed. He hadn't signed up for any of this. No alien bonding rituals, no deep emotional connections. But as he looked at her, something inside him stirred. He had tried to resist it, tried to keep things strictly professional, but the more time he spent with Lyra, the harder it became to deny the pull he felt towards her. "What are you saying exactly?" Jared asked cautiously, his voice barely above a whisper. "Are you saying that I'm supposed to just give in to these feelings?" Lyra reached out, her hand gently resting on the table in front of him. "I'm not asking you to give in to anything, Jared. I'm simply saying that I feel something between us, and I think perhaps you do too. Your emotions, your responses, they are hard to ignore." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Jared's mind raced. There was no denying that Lyra was unlike anyone he had ever met. The way she could read him, the way her emotions seemed to reach into his very being, was unlike anything he had experienced. And despite his best efforts to keep a distance, he couldn't stop the connection that seemed to be growing between them. "I don't know what to do with this," Jared admitted, finally breaking the silence. "I'm not ready for this kind of connection. You're not just my housekeeper, you're something else. You're an alien. This is too much for me to handle." Lyra's eyes softened, and for a moment, Jared saw something in her that he hadn't before, a glimpse of vulnerability. "I understand your confusion," she said quietly. "But know this. The bond I feel with you is not a result of my species' customs. It is something more, something that transcends culture. It is because of you, Jared Hughes, and the way you make me feel. I'm not asking you to change your ways or abandon your beliefs. I am simply offering you the chance to explore this connection." Jared's heart raced as he processed her words. She wasn't just an alien learning about humans. She was offering him something real, something deeper. He wasn't sure he was ready to explore it, but part of him wondered if he should. Was it possible that he was looking for something more too? He leaned back in his chair, staring at her with a mixture of awe and uncertainty. "You really are different, aren't you?" Lyra smiled, her eyes gleaming. "In ways you might not yet understand, Jared. But I'm hoping you'll give me the chance to show you. This bond, this connection, it's new for both of us. But I believe it can be something beautiful." As the words hung in the air, Jared couldn't help but feel his resolve wavering. The last few days had been an emotional roller coaster, but now, looking at Lyra, he realized that maybe, just maybe, he wasn't as alone as he had thought. He was about to step into a world he never imagined, and though it was terrifying, it also felt strangely right. "I don't know where this is going," Jared said quietly, "but maybe it's worth finding out." Lyra's smile widened, and her crest rippled in what seemed to be a sign of approval. "I'm glad you feel that way. I promise, Jared, this journey will be unlike anything you've ever experienced." And in that moment, Jared knew that his life was about to change forever. What began as a simple misunderstanding had turned into something much deeper, something that neither of them could have predicted. He wasn't sure where the road would take them, but for the first time, he was willing to see where it led. Few days following Jared's admission to himself that he was willing to explore this strange, developing connection with Lyra were filled with mixed emotions. He couldn't help but feel like he was constantly on edge, as if something just beyond his grasp was waiting to unfold. Their interactions had shifted in an unexpected way. What had started as an awkward encounter in his bedroom had now morphed into something deeper, something neither of them had anticipated. The more time Jared spent with Lyra, the more complicated his emotions became. It wasn't just about the physical attraction he couldn't deny. It was something much deeper. The way she seemed to understand his thoughts before he even said them. The way her calm presence soothed his chaotic mind. Lyra wasn't just a housekeeper. She wasn't just an alien from a distant planet. She was a connection, a bond forming between them that defied logic, cultural differences, and his carefully constructed boundaries. One evening, as the two of them sat on the couch in his living room, Jared found himself staring at her with a mixture of curiosity and awe. Lyra, as always, seemed completely at ease. Her glowing lavender skin seemed to shimmer softly under the light, her sapphire eyes gleaming as she spoke about the Tavari customs. As much as Jared tried to keep things professional, the intimacy of their daily exchanges, whether it was a shared meal, a moment of laughter, or a conversation about their vastly different cultures, felt like a new kind of connection he wasn't sure he was ready for. "I've been thinking," Jared began, his voice hesitant as he shifted in his seat, "about everything you said, the bond, the connection between us. I don't know if I fully understand it yet, but it feels like something real, something more than just you being my housekeeper." Lyra's eyes softened, her gaze unwavering as she looked at him. "I understand," she said, her voice gentle. "What you're feeling is not just physical attraction. It's the connection my species feels with those we bond with. It's a deep, emotional and spiritual bond. something that transcends the physical. You've begun to sense it too, Jared. I can feel it. Jared let out a shaky breath. He hadn't realized just how much he'd been sensing her emotions until now. Her words brought a strange clarity to his confusion. He'd been avoiding the inevitable for so long, but the reality of their bond was becoming undeniable. He had tried to keep his distance, tried to remain in control of the situation, but now he found himself wondering if it was worth fighting. Maybe, just maybe, he could let go of the walls he had built around himself. But just as the thought began to form, a chime sounded from his door, cutting through the moment. Lyra immediately stood up, her eyes flashing with alertness. Jared followed her as she moved toward the door with that same fluid grace that had intrigued him from the start. Before he could say anything, Lyra opened the door, revealing a group of individuals standing outside. Their presence felt different, an energy that was unfamiliar, yet strangely familiar to Lyra. Jared's eyes widened as he recognized Lyra's parents standing before him. The two alien figures were dressed in formal attire that seemed to shimmer with an otherworldly glow, their features sharp and elegant. Lyra's father, Oren, had the same lavender skin, but his crest was more pronounced, standing high on his head like an intricate crown. Her mother, Celia, was equally regal, her pale blue skin glowing faintly as she greeted Jared with an unexpected warmth. The moment their eyes met, Jared felt something stir within him, an awareness that was hard to put into words. "Jared Hughes," Oren said, his voice deep and commanding. "We have come to speak with you about something very important." He glanced at Lyra, who had stepped aside to let them in, her crest rippling in an almost anxious gesture. "We must discuss your bond with our daughter." Lyra moved toward her parents, standing between them and Jared, her eyes darting between her family and her human employer. Jared felt an odd sense of unease settle in his chest as Lyra's parents exchanged looks that carried unspoken weight. He could sense the tension in the air as though he was being pulled into something far bigger than his understanding of the situation. "Do you feel it, Jared?" Lyra asked quietly, her voice low and almost apologetic. "The connection between us has grown, and my parents wish to test its strength. They believe in a certain trial to prove if the bond is truly strong." Jared furrowed his brow, confusion and apprehension washing over him. "Trial? What kind of trial?" Lyra's mother, Celia, spoke before anyone else could. "It is called the trial of worthiness. It is a tradition of our people. When a Tivari bonds with someone of another species, the bond must be tested. It's a trial that measures not only the strength of the emotional connection, but the ability of the bond to transcend cultural boundaries." She paused, her eyes sharp as she studied Jared. "It is not meant to harm, but it will challenge you, Jared. If you wish to move forward with Lyra, you must prove your worth to her family." Jared stared at them, his mind reeling. A trial? He wasn't sure if he was ready for something like that. Everything had been so sudden, so overwhelming. But as he looked at Lyra, her eyes wide with both hope and nervousness, he realized that this wasn't something he could back away from. She had already given him so much, already opened up parts of herself he never thought he'd see. "All right," Jared said, his voice low but steady. "I'll do it. I'll prove myself." Lyra's crest rippled with visible relief, and her eyes softened as she approached him. "Thank you, Jared," she whispered, her voice filled with gratitude. "You don't have to do this, but I'm glad you are. This means more than you know." Oren stepped forward, his tall frame casting a shadow over Jared as he prepared to explain the trial. "The trial of worthiness will take place in the ceremonial arena," he explained. "It is not just physical. It will test your ability to adapt to new situations, to understand the Tivari way of communication, and ultimately, to prove that you can withstand the bond we share." Jared nodded, his heart pounding in his chest. There was no turning back. Now, he had already committed to this strange new life with Lyra, and it seemed like the next step was going to be far more difficult than he had imagined. As the group began to prepare for the trial, Jared couldn't shake the feeling that his life was about to take a turn he couldn't control. But despite the fear, there was something inside him that made him determined to face whatever lay ahead. He wasn't just fighting for Lyra anymore. He was fighting for himself, for this strange, unexpected connection that had begun to shape his world in ways he hadn't thought possible. Lyra, standing by his side, gave him a quiet smile, her crest flickering with what seemed to be hope. "We will face this together, Jared," she said softly. "Whatever happens, you are not alone." And with that, they stepped forward into a future that neither of them could have predicted.